for joining Signals and Symptoms today. Really appreciate it. We have an exciting guest today, Dr. Robert Pearl, who, if I start talking about him, he has been the CEO of Kaiser Permanente. I mean, apparently this year alone, he has given 40 keynotes. He's at Stanford. I'll let him introduce himself properly. But as you know, both of my favorite people, Dr. GPT, which is Harvey's here, and then we have Chat GPT MD as a book here. So both of them have written books on GPT. So I'll let them, powwow together and then go from there. But I mean, I'm so honored for him to take this time and talk to us. As usual, we're going to start with some of the updates around the globe and how things have been moving towards the AI front. I don't know if you guys know, Open Router is essentially like an amalgamation of different AI providers concentrated into one API, and you can connect to multiple different providers. They reported 100 million trillion token study with Open Router. And then what was interesting, Harvey, and I want your opinion on it, and Dr. Pearl, you can jump in, is that look at this. The highest amount of model authors with total token in trillions was DeepSeek is number one, which is Chinese. Qwen is number two, which is Chinese. Meta Llama, which is open source. Mistral is French company. And of course, then we come to OpenAI. Minimax is also an open source. ZAI is open source. It seems right. Of course, I go to Gemini directly or OpenAI directly to get their API access. But it was very interesting to see that people are much more interested in, first of all, going into what we call open source models. But I was like really surprised to see that DeepSeek is this high.
Yeah. Well, to me, it kind of makes sense, right? If it's open source and people are able to use it, then there's no cost to market in a way. It doesn't cost you all this money to jump in, and then same for Quinn, and then Meta if it's the open source exactly the same. And then Mistral at one point was open source. I know Microsoft, I'm pretty sure, bought them out, and so it's interesting. So it seems like the one that's
Right.
being paid is OpenAI, and that's like fifth on the list or something.
And Google is even at the bottom. So, but again, those companies have direct API access, which we use. Of course, we don't go through Open Router, but this is very important thing to see. What is important also is the amount of people that are actually using these models and causing it. Just since we are on DeepSeek, they actually pushed another model called V3.2. And this is insane in terms of DeepSeek Spyco, which is actually, and then their thinking model, and they compared it with GPT-5 and Claude 4.0 Sonnet is not the right comparison. But Gemini 3.0 Pro, which just got released 2 weeks ago, and if you look at the numbers, it is insane. This open source model, completely open source model, by the way, with weights, because I downloaded it and tested it, is insanely and out basically near performing GPT-5 and Gemini 3.0 Pro. There are actually some benchmarks that I don't want to go into because I haven't tested it, but at the end of the day, it was able to show on, let me find that chart, that on humanity's last exam is actually performs worse, which is actually Gemini Pro the highest. But again, insane performance of DeepSeek 3.2, and clearly the usage goes well with their, and open sourceness as well. OpenAI also released the State of Enterprise AI. And that is a very important report that you guys need to see. They have 800 million users every week, which is insane, looking at the company's progress. So this is the starting point. You guys, whoever is listening to this podcast, of course, interested, make sure you listen to this. The important thing that I wanted to highlight over here, in Absolute Enterprise customers are most concentrated in professional services, finance, and technology. And of course, technology, which is 11x year over year growth. Do you see that? But Harvey, look at this. And Dr. Pearl, how would you, is it Dr. Pearl or Robert? How would you like me to?
You call me Robbie because that's what my friends all call me, and you guys are my friends. So
Okay. So, Robbie, look at this. Healthcare has a year over year growth of 8x. It's even more than manufacturing. So, the three things that they actually say is that, of course, technology, right? I mean, I'm using AI coding, all of these things. I mean, technology makes sense. But then the biggest shift year over year growth is in healthcare. I was impressed. I did not know that, Harvey.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, it's like
Yeah,
insane
I
amount of
think
numbering.
That is one of the main reasons why in the year 2022 I wrote that book, ChatGPT Healthcare. How can we leverage? Because I really honestly felt this would be a big disruptor, and it really is. I'm now working on the second edition for that, and I'm glad to see that reinforces my thoughts from back then.
Amazing.
Same thing with me, Harvey.
So
When I wrote my book, ChatGPT MD, the number of people who were using it was tiny. In a recent survey I did on my monthly Musings website model, people said that it's close to 80% of people are now using it for healthcare questions over the past 3 months. So I think this is going to be universal very, very quickly, particularly as the open source models make it free to be able to access a large language model.
correct. Which comes to an interesting, because everyone keeps saying AI is in a bubble, AI is in a bubble. And I'm just gonna point you to this article that is 1.5 trillion AI revenue hole. And again, I talked about it last time, like how companies think. I'm just going to give you an example. It is very easy for my company to show investor and stock value by decreasing the number of people. So just to give you an example, the total cost of my personal, in terms of coding has gone down because we are using AI coders. The total cost of legal review has gone down because we are doing initially legal reviews with the AI first and then go back. And since we have all these templates available already, so the way that people continue to think, okay, we need customers to revenue, but Google and Microsoft think differently. OpenAI is in a different situation. Google can just decrease their cost overall and can do this. One of the other things that it does, AI revenues have indeed exploded. By the end of 2025, OpenAI expects 20 billion. Anthropic is expected to 9 billion. So if you really look at it, that these companies were going at 20x at least. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you, the valuation is on par. And I know people keep saying about that it's a bubble, but we need that infrastructure. We need the roads, the lamps, and everything so the trucks can deliver food to your, Chick-fil-A or McDonald's. So people forget that infrastructure is so important and requires deep significance. The only difference is in 1950s, government did it. Over here, of course, we're looking at private companies, and of course, some of these companies we can actually be part of. It says that the dry powder by year is actually going to go down again. I did completely disagree. As a matter of fact, if you look at this, is 2020 is actually the COVID. This is post-COVID and 259 billion. They are expecting in the year, basically, that one of the reasons that the dry powder is that is Microsoft and all of them did the private deals. Again, this is a very big meta level. But again, if you look at the year-over-year growth of different cloud companies, other than the big three, you're going to see that all of them are making significant improvement. So again, people say that it is a bubble, which it is. I mean, don't get me wrong. Of course, there's a hype around it, but it's not like a true bubble like we saw inside when we were doing the .com bubble in 2020s. I think there is a significant amount of movement going through. Another paper, very important, from code foundation models to agents and application. This does a comprehensive survey and practical guide to code intelligence. Again, we talked about it last time. If you know how to code, you can build any solution. So rather than me telling LLM to build and answer the question, I tell LLM to build a software, and that software answers the question. So coding intelligence is basically extremely important. I want to reiterate last time that White House is extremely interested in, and they are launching what we call the Genesis mission to basically bringing AI at the level of this. This is a very good article, how AI companies will build real defensibility. And this is something important for you guys, companies, especially Harvey. You should read this. I'll send you personally as well, because you mentor so many people. I'm assuming Robbie does too. The core defensibility area, and there is a network effect. Again, each additional client comes in, creates a big thing. I mean, we just installed in 2 Qatar areas, and now we are already getting 10, and then we're going to explode to 20 just because people just know about it. Data mode is actually very, very important. I'm going to tell you right now, at least in healthcare, and distribution is, of course, one of the things. And then branding. Everyone loves Save Life AI brand. I actually had multiple times people tell me, I love the company's name, and I think it's very important that you brand it properly. Again, startup timing is important, and sometimes it's all about thinking it. This is, again, a very important article that I wanted to highlight, that everyone should understand that think first and then apply AI. because the minute you think about the problem, convert it into first principle thinking, which, by the way, I have to say Harvey's book again, that you once you do that, you will be able to understand how to even prompt it properly and then go from there. So this is again very beautifully written. I'm going to put it in the show notes as well. Another thing that I did not realize, and I read this article, I have to double check it, but I know Herman, he's a very fantastic guy. Will AI eliminate need for contrast in CT and other modalities? And if you look at this just use case wise, it's insane. If you really think about it, like how much contrast we have to give. And not to mention, because if the contrast is studied as an increased radiation bolus, so now radiation is going to go down as well. So there are things that are coming out that, again, I did not think of, and I'm in the freaking field right now. Anyways, these are the updates. I'm going to say, Robbie, thank you again so much for coming. I'm very, very grateful. And I'm actually very excited to have this discussion with you in terms of, especially by the end of the year. And you have been traveling, you have been teaching, what have your thoughts has been overall. So first, for our audience, reintroduce, I apologize for not properly introducing yourself because there's so much to say. So go ahead.
Well, I'm not quite sure where you want me to start in this process. About myself, I teach at the Stanford Medical and Business Schools. I write for Forbes. I have my own podcast called Fixing Healthcare. I have my monthly newsletter that has almost 100,000 subscribers now. And people want more information, they can go to my website, robertpearlmd.com. But I'll make a couple of comments on what you just said, if that would be okay. First of all, I think we need to redefine what a bubble is. I mean, again, I teach at the business school. What you're going to see is a lot of companies are going to fail, but the ones that succeed are going to become huge. That's what really came out of the so-called 2000 bubble. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm not sure I've been in a store in a long time because Amazon is my store. It delivers to my house all the time. That is what the vision was at the particular time. And we're going to see the same thing now. I mean, that there's going to be 10 or 12 or 15 companies. That's simply not going to happen. The second thing I really want to point out, and I think you're providing information on so many organizations offering large language models, particularly open source ones, is that we are just at the start of this process. November 30th was 3 years. That's nothing for a new transformative technology to have the impact sitting there. And I think the biggest set of opportunities, and this is where I think people are going to be the biggest limiting factor, not the technology, is that people are going to take the open source models, they're going to distill out of them information very specific into the healthcare sphere, and then they're going to train it and start to think about how many places we have massive information. I mean, I think one of the big successes in the AI arena has been the ambient listening AI EHR recordings. That's going to be universal everywhere. So now you have technology that has interaction of every patient and every doctor. What could be better to train a model on? Anyone who thinks that it can't then duplicate and imitate and not only equal, but equal the best of the clinicians at making a diagnosis doesn't understand the evolution and the exponential doubling of this technology going forward. What's going to be the limiting factor? Access to that data. Think about every advice center in the United States today. You call up, they have to record the information because quality reasons and legal reasons. We're talking about a massive amount of training data. The limiting factor in generative AI is not the technology. It's the material on which it can be trained. Think about the bedside monitors in the hospital, a terabyte of data, 10 with 14 zeros after it. And we throw 97% of the data away. I could go down the entire list of material. I don't think there's an area in any industry that is more ripe for disruption with a generative AI tool than healthcare.
Again, Robbie, you have been a little bit more humble. He has been at amazing places in the past, helping major clinical institutions to guide them through digital transformation in the past, and I'm assuming AI transformation today. Number one, I agree 100%. Bubble is not there. The timeline is not even close to what we have seen. Number three, I understand completely the data point as well, but what we have done in terms of our training is concerned, with limited data, with Harvey keeps talking about digital twins and synthetic data as well, and especially now, as a matter of fact, FDA has released a breast imaging complete synthetic data and has allowed us to train on it. So we are actually looking at that moat to be actually significantly changing as we go along, especially companies like us, which we already have millions of data points. But then, okay, why don't I have a basilar aneurysm, which is fusiform type? I need to train the data. Let's just create some synthetic data, make sure, and then, and of course, disclose everything to FDA, which we do. Not that we're doing it, but I'm just saying it that where FDA is actually changing its tune. And then again, Harvey, back to you, man.
Yeah,
Thoughts on what he said?
I agree with you, Rob. I think big picture, it's all about the data. But for me, I think the rate limiting step is the culture. We can have all the data and all that, but if the leaders above are not accepting, looking, or creating, then we're stuck. And so that's why I'm really enjoyed traveling, seeing the different countries, how they're using the different platforms. For me in the United States, I want to see lots of changes, but I see the culture needs to adapt and institutions. With that, I'd love to hear your thoughts on what do you think of the medical students now moving forward with this information?
As I said, I teach at the Stanford Medical School as well as the business school, and I can't find a single student who's not using a generative AI tool every single day. I mean, preparing for rounds, learning all the material sitting in textbooks, trying to figure out how the tools can be so much better. So we're looking at a very fascinating to me cultural clash that's coming up because the people coming into the school are going to be smarter than their professors. That's never really happened. If you think about it, up to this particular point, the medical students had no idea what was going on. They had to learn basic minimal terms. Then they had always the professor who would come in and give the lectures and teach the pieces. And that's still going to be true, of course, for some of the medical information. That's why I think this cultural piece is so crucial. But they have a skill that their professors don't. And I can't think of a time in the history of medicine, and that's going to be incredibly disruptive. At some particular time, I think patients are essentially going to realize that the quality of care they're going to get is going to be so much better. There's 400,000 people who die annually in the United States from misdiagnoses, another 400,000 who die from, not who die from, but permanent disability from misdiagnoses. That's a huge number of people. And what we know is that this technology is going to be as good as, or maybe better than, it's a second opinion. Imagine for the same price, without any added time, you could have two doctors. That's really what you're going to be getting in the exam room. I mean, I have, and I'm sure you do too, Harvey, I have hundreds of stories of people whose diagnosis was made possible because the technology was used either by the physician or the patient. 3 years in is not a time for cultural change. It takes a lot longer than that. But it's not going to stop the evolution of this technology. As I said earlier, I think we're going to see these agents who are able to provide.
Uh-oh.
Think about it. The biggest challenge in the United States today is chronic disease. 70% of care is, 70% of the time that we spend with clinicians is over chronic disease. The CDC says that if we could maximize our care in chronic disease, and it's not the impossible level, just matching the best in the United States today, what we'd see is that a 30 to 50% reduction in heart attacks, strokes, kidney failures, and cancers. I mean, that is such a powerful target to go to. And why don't we get there? Because we take care of a chronic problem with an intermittent solution. We see patients in our office every 4 months for a disease that is there and changing every single day. We could start a medication for hypertension and within a month know how well it's working and make an adjustment. Why don't we do it? Because there's no clinician in the United States, in the world probably today, who wants 100 blood pressure readings every single month. But give that data to a generative AI tool, first and second derivative calculations, now we would know very, very quickly. The same for blood sugar, the same for heart failure. We could take all of these problems and literally monitor them. The hospital at home. What's the limiting factor? We want to know how the patient's doing. There's a great opportunity to be able to use a generative AI tool to do it. Think about in the hospital. What do nurses do? They go from patient 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. They don't, maybe it's 4 hours between seeing the patient once and seeing the second time. This tool can tell us who is in trouble. The equivalent of a telemetry can be provided for every inpatient, not just the small number who are sitting there with a nurse sitting at a screen looking at 12 or 14 different individuals out of might be 200 patients in a hospital at a given time. The opportunities are massive. And when you have that many opportunities, you have lots of companies who are developing it. And so the real question to me is going to be, will this be a pull or a push? Will it be physicians and clinicians who pull this along, or will they get pushed by companies that create it and patients who then demand it?
So very beautifully said, and I'm going to put that again, just to push back on it, and again, putting on to the Harvey's point. Number one, I 100% agree that it's not enough time for a cultural shift. But let me give you an example. I was the last batch where the paper charts were used, and then we moved to electronic health records. And I keep saying that about 5% of senior physicians just retired early. They just don't want to cope up. That's problem number one. What are your thoughts on both of you? So we can start with Harvey this time. And then number two, why is Qatar and Dubai and Morocco is leading the way in terms of this, in terms of Singapore? Harvey is actually officially. Start Harvey. Why there is a cultural slowness, laziness, or whatever, drag on the US just because of the system is set up, or what are your thoughts on that?
For me, I think Dr. Pearl, all three of us are physicians. It's a certain culture, right? Do you remember when we went to med school and, it was taboo to have a tattoo, and, it's like, whoa, you won't get accepted if you haven't had a tattoo. Today, that doesn't happen. Our industry is very conservative, and I feel like that conservativeness has spread into the C-suite. And as a result, legislation, interest groups have surrounded around that and reinforcing that. And there's a lot of leaders that unfortunately haven't woken up to this. I always talk about Martek's law, which is basically the technology is exponential, but our organizations and even ourselves are logarithmic. And when the gap increases to the point where it's too much, a disruption happens. And that's why I love certain hospital systems that are very progressive, because they're disruptors. They're disrupting the ones that are not doing. And so I love what he said, because what's going to happen is our society is going to say, hey, I need X. And I love going to Singapore as an advisor for the Ministry of Health there. I'm seeing things. I'm seeing different technologies, and I'm thinking, unfortunately, in the United States, if the culture doesn't change, this is not going to happen here. But I truly think we're going to get FOMO, fear of missing out. We're going to be like, whoa, Dubai is doing this. Singapore is doing this, and going out to our legislators and saying, why is the GDP so expensive when we could do it a different way? And I really think that pressure is going to make change. Dr. Pearl, what do you think?
Well, let me start with where you began, the electronic health record. It was a terrible technology. I mean, it was designed, first of all, not to take care of patients. It was designed purely for billing. It used out-of-date technology, and it's still. I mean, again, the ambient listening tools are fabulous. The major advances moving forward. But the actual underlying technology itself doesn't work very well. Let's go back to look at what happens, the so-called, well, I hated Dr. Google coming to my office. Well, what was that about? Well, you had patients going and clicking on links through a browser. What can they do with that information? I mean, we have trouble interpreting some of the articles in the literature. They can't even know where to start. So they're hunting and pecking for answers. Generative AI is a totally different technology. It provides expertise. We have to understand we are now at a moment in history that completely changes the world in the same way that the printing press. What it did is it allowed us to have universities. We wouldn't have universities if we didn't have books. We wouldn't have the ability to have a educated and literate population. We're talking about the internet. How much information do you have by going to the library and looking something up when it's right there in your hand 24/7? This is that type of technology that's going to move forward. So that's what I see If this were not generative AI, like both of you, I do a lot of consulting. And I can remember like 5 years ago, I get calls from all these people talking about how their AI tools will save 2 to 3 hours a day. And they want my help because they don't know how somehow doctors aren't buying this tool that is so great. And I said, look, I'll save you a lot of money. You don't have to pay me to consult to you because I'll tell you, tool's not very great. Because if it saved to 2 to 3 hours a day, you know your biggest problem? You'd have a line out the door that you'd have to manage if people want to get your product. It would be like, the new Nike shoe. No, you don't have a technology that does that. We now have a technology that does that. And it's infancy. But that's where I think you're absolutely right. The establishment is not going to lead this process. But when you have a tool, and I really think that it's not far away, where you actually can obtain medical expertise, reliable expertise using I'm talking about a patient at home, we're going to see an explosion. And we're going to have to be building it into our curriculum because medical students need to understand how you take care of a patient, how a disease impacts. And that's not a technological question. That's learning how you actually become a clinician. But you'll have this tool that is going to be absolutely powerful. After the publication of my book, I was on a podcast like this, but the host had never used a generative AI tool. And she said, Dr. Pearl, you're a big skier. You're a doctor. My husband fell 3 months ago. His arm was over his head. He slid up at 100 feet. And it's now 3 months later, and he can't use that arm as well as the opposite side, and it still hurts. What's going on? I said, I think I know exactly what he has. But do me a favor. You said you never used generative AI. Just use the free version. Go into ChatGPT, put your information in place, and after you've done all that, give me a call back and I'll tell you what I think is going on. 5 days later, she calls back and says, thank you so much. We put the information in place. It said he probably had a rotator cuff tear. He needed an MRI for a diagnosis, and he should see an orthopedic surgeon because he almost definitely needed to have a procedure done. Think of how different that is than when you click on a browser link before generative AI was built into it. Go back a year or so into the time period. And she said, basically, when we went to the doctor said, I think you have a rotator cuff tear. She knew what the rotator cuff was. They knew exactly what was going on. I think you need an MRI. Yeah. They didn't have to question, was it really necessary? What was the copayment going to be? And then the surgeon, of course, said that we got in there. If I'd waited 3 more months, I probably could not have reattached the tendon because the muscle will have shrunk. That is expertise. And I think that when that happens, it's going to have to pull the medical establishment forward in a way that it never has happened because there was always this hierarchy where the patient was so much below the clinician in terms of medical knowledge. That day is ending. In the same way that you started the podcast talking about coding, people who have never coded in their life can spend a little bit of time and across a weekend be able to code and create an application. Is it a sophisticated application that you and Harvey can do? No, not yet. But the fact that they can code without having to spend 2 or 3 years in a school, think about how different it is today than simply 3 years ago. That's where we are now. And now it doubles every year. 5 years from now, it's 32 times more powerful. That's the equivalent of your car going as fast as an airplane. I mean, as you can tell, I couldn't be more excited, not about what exists today. Today's really interesting and fun, but what's coming in the near future. And I think that, as I say, it's a bubble in that not everyone will get to the pinnacle, but the ones that do, they have a remarkable, a Google type, a Meta type world that's sitting ahead of them.
Well said, very well said. Again, I'm going to keep pushing you back on the cultural change issue. And both of you have a global view and a generational view. By the way, I forgot to share an article. We just realized, by the way, that Gen Z doesn't care about brands as much. So that's another, by the way, shift coming up. And the reason that I bring this up right now is that the traditional, what you use the word establishment, is now being at a brand level, which is so like ingrained, right? We grew up with Coca-Cola and Snickers. But what I'm saying is that if you look at it, the things are changing significantly when you call Gen Z as being this. Harvey, in your travels, still like ministry level people are, I don't know, above the age of 40 or 50, I'm assuming. But when your travels come in, and then when these officials and etc., have you seen sort of a dichotomy in terms of aggressiveness of moving forward faster? Uh, and then number two, of course, ChatGPT has removed their healthcare education, because I believe that they are actually going to be sued, so therefore they're getting very better at it. But long story short, as I completely agree that there would be tools available, and then physicians are going to how the provider patient relationship is going to change. We always talked about it should be a joint and partnership and everything, but at the end of the day, I am writing orders. Like the word is order, MRI brain. So again, your thoughts on that? Again, give me a global view and a generational view, both of you. And then lastly, what would a physician look like in 2035?
Yeah.
So
So big, yeah. When I've been working with the Ministry of Health, I'm very excited. They're very proactive. They're like, "Let's do it. What do we got to do? What do we need to change? What are the laws?" I'll never forget when I first started a couple of years ago with them. I jokingly said, "Oh, I forget what it was, but it was something like, oh, I wish we could do this." And he's like, "Okay, Harvey, we'll just change the law." And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, we'll just change the law and we'll make that happen." And I'm thinking, oh my God, I forget. I'm such in the US mindset that I needed to shift and say, okay, this is Singapore and it's top down. And if they want it, they have the resources, the money, the power to say, this is the way. Another
just
example, I
for a
was in
reference, there is a term we use, act of Congress, as it's never going to happen. So just keep that in mind. Keep going. Sorry.
Exactly. And then when I was in Dubai, I was excited because I got to meet some of the different princes and rulers and different countries. And when I would speak to them, they're like, "Yeah, we want this technology. It's going to happen, and we're going to do what we can." And it's this perfect storm because if they have one medical record for the country, on the AI side, you have the data you can analyze, you can do stuff. If you have the genetics of everybody, people are like, oh shit, that's Big Brother stuff. No, no, no. But think about it from a healthcare. We're all doctors here. If we had that information, we're modeling it and creating digital twins and improving your health, man, next level. And then to jump into the question of the future, I just got these bad boys. They're the new Meta glasses, and it
Oh.
has the band, and I have the screen right here, and I love these things. And the reason I'm wearing them is not for show at all. It's to say, you know what, if this is on my arm, and I'm able to create and move the virtual window that's right here, then you, my patient, wouldn't see me using my hand, and I could be scrolling, I could be pulling up the latest guidelines, I could be using data analytics on your face. So this AI is looking at you saying, okay, I see high blood pressure, I'm seeing pre-diabetics, and it's here, and now I can customize the way I talk down to the emotional intelligence. If I pair these bad boys where I'm able to now read over 80 emotions on you, and let's just pretend I'm autistic or I'm having trouble with that communication, and now it's able to extract the unwritten words that are said. Now my care is next level, and I really think that will be part of the future. What do you guys think?
Robbie, what
My
do you
biggest
think?
my biggest focus is that the whole approach will be flipped around. So what I mean by that is you're either going to be right now you're either office or hospital based, depending upon what your specialty is, depending upon where your practice is. And by definition, therefore, the patient comes to you when they either have when they need, I'll call it a checkup, some problem that they need to see how well it's doing, or because they have a new symptom. Yes, they can occasionally call to an advice center or talk to a nurse or some other way get that information, but for the most part, that's the way they get the care. No, what they need to have is a way to monitor them continually, have you in their home, and rather than being a calendar-based care system, which is what we have today, we're going to be moving into a continuous monitoring where the people that you're seeing are the ones who need you. It's a lot of people that don't need to see you because we can get all of that information, all that monitoring sitting in play. So you completely shift around. If you have 100 people, let's say post-operatively, you know that 3 of them are going to have a major complication. What do we do now? We call 100 people. That's massively ineffective. Instead, we're going to be able to say, here are 10 people that the data has told us. We don't know who the 3 are yet, but we do know they're one of these 10 or 3 of these 10. That's the opportunity to move from intermittent care to continuous monitoring. It's not that the clinician won't be important. The clinician will be important for the patients who need it. I make an analogy to cancer screening. What do? We screen you by age. What we really want to be doing is screening you by probability of cancer. If your probability is 1 in 1,000, we may not have to do a screening test on you. It's not we couldn't do it. It's just a lot of, radiologic exposure, let's say for 999 people who don't have that particular problem. But if we can take those 1,000 people and say, here are the 25 people with the highest risk, now we have a different set of problems. I mean, what do we know right now? Cancer is expanding in people under the age of 50. But we're not yet at a point where screening everyone under the age of 50 is the right thing to do. Generative AI is going to tell us who are the right people to be able to be screening in that age group and be able to bring them in. So it's moving from episodic to continuous. It's moving from reactive to proactive. It's being able to create a probability factor for what is going on, whether you're in a hospital, whether you're post-operative, whether you have chronic heart failure, you're worried about acute heart failure, whether you have new symptoms that are developing. And think about how many people we probably could diagnose earlier for various cancers that are difficult to take care of, but they don't come in. We don't have that information. Or so many people come in with abdominal pain. This is the kind of opportunity that we have. Now, one of the challenges in this field is, are we talking 3 years, 7 years, or 15 years? Because it's going to change. An article I just wrote in Forbes is why generative AI plus operative robots is going to do autonomous surgery. And everyone says, oh, that's impossible. No. What comes in off of a patient sitting on an operating table? A digital information that we convert to a video visit, because we can't read digital. Humans are not that talented, but the technology can. And what happens next? A physician pulls levers or moves hands or makes movements that then tell information back to the 8 arms of the operative robot. That is a perfect solution for a generative AI tool. It's exactly what happens when you give it a verbal prompt to an action that's there. We think single mode, it's multimodal. That is what this technology does. It doesn't care whether it's a word that's written, a word that's spoken, an image that's sitting in play. I saw a great demonstration of someone creating an educational tool for patients. And all they gave the technology was the kinds of facts they wanted. And it created a powerful tool for patient education, literally a video that was better than anything that I've seen any of the groups create who we're paying a lot of money to be able to come in and accomplish all of that and to film it all. Yeah, these opportunities are so massive.
So massive. Okay. So again, we're gonna. So I love that you gave these examples, and I'm gonna fly to Stanford one day and sit in your class with your permission. But what, what I'm gonna do is now let me challenge you guys again. Charlie Munger once said, "Tell me where the incentives are, and I'll tell you what the outcomes will be." Okay. Now, you perfectly painted a picture, both of you. And of course, Harvey gave an example from an international perspective that they can change incentives very quickly and therefore change outcomes. So now that we know that we're going to be wearing this, we're going to have continuous monitoring, we're going to go from sick care to essentially healthcare. And the idea is this: how do you think that overall reimbursement environment from both governmental perspective and insurance perspective will evolve over time? What would be the pushbacks and rate limiting factors? And how will we be able to realign, hopefully, finally, with the help of AI, the vision of health, not sick care? Harvey, you go first if you don't mind. By the way, I play a host, Robbie. So
No, I love this space. I truly think my favorite phrase for the year is we don't know what we don't know. So it's us leaders here, responsibility to educate other leaders that have the power to make those changes. Last week I met with Governor Abbott for Texas, and it was a great conversation of what his ideas are. And big picture, he really believes in AI, and the number two is space, which ironically, those are the two things that I'm working on. And he's trying to change the legislation and movement and everything towards that. And it gave me a lot of solace because I thought, okay, great, we have a governor of the state that is looking forward. And if he makes those changes, and he has, then I think it'll be that ripple effect because then it'll be like, well, Texas is doing it and they're doing it this way, and it'll lead the future. So I'm really excited. The second thing I noticed a couple years ago is Singapore made this bold statement, and I was shocked. They came out and said, we're changing the law, which they did, that anyone over 40 needs to be retrained, and we're going to pay for their education because of the AI future. And I thought, man, again, the future is here. They know it's changing. They need to change their citizens, and they're going to put the investment. It's like, wow. What do you guys think?
This is the most important question, the one you just raised. I love the Charlie Munger quote. I often use it myself. In my book, ChatGPT MD, I say doctors will never do something that either takes them more time or cuts their income. That's the history of medicine in the United States. It's, every system of medicine, whether it's private or public, has ups and downs. And that's the challenge, because something that's going to benefit patients but have one of those two impacts is not likely to be embraced. And I teach a class, it's 10 weeks, so it takes a while to be able to do it. We will have to evolve the reimbursement system in the United States if we want generative AI to be used. And so again, this is a push-pull situation. I think it will happen because we have to use generative AI. Now, if you look at, I'm a big proponent of capitation for the reasons you say, for the Charlie Munger quote. Because in a capitated system, it starts to emphasize prevention, chronic disease control. It means rather than using hospitals 5 days a week, you start to use them 7 days a week. You can go down the whole list of ways that are there. I think we could probably take out somewhere between $1 and $2 trillion out of healthcare spend if we could just do the things that we know are possible that we don't do because the system rewards volume, not superior clinical outcomes. So I think the change has to happen in the reimbursement methodology. But I'll also point out that this is my third book. My first book was called Mistreated, Why We Think We're Getting Good Healthcare, We're Usually Wrong. It was written in 2017. And I talked about some of the same things that needed to happen, but we didn't have the tool to make it happen. So if I tell you guys, you've got to take risk, but I don't give you a way to win or have a high probability of winning at the risk game, you're not going to do it. And that's what we tried to do for so long. The idea that you can capitate an insurance company and then pay doctors and hospitals on fee-for-service and expect you're going to get a different outcome is absurd. It's not going to happen, particularly if you don't have 100% of someone's practice. You go back and look in the political arena of the United States when the ACA was passed. How did they create accountable care organizations? They did a compromise. You couldn't require the patient to tell the doctor they were part of the ACO. How do we know what's going on? It's all a broken system. And I think that generative AI in the United States will lag every other country, no matter what the three of us say, no matter how much opportunity there is, until we make this evolution. But as soon as you make the evolution, now the technology becomes so powerful. There's opportunity to say, I don't need to see everyone because I know how they're doing. I'm monitoring them every single day. It's not that it's a second-rate care. It is so much better. It's like having your own private nurse and private doctor in your home every day evaluating your health and giving you information, along with a nutritionist, as well as a lifestyle coach. You can go to all the pieces that are there,
That is
every
connected with your
Sunday night,
calendar, by the way. So nobody has to come and significantly review it. So cool. So cool. Yeah.
every Sunday night, my wife and I sit down and we say, "What do you want to eat this week?" And we're both very healthy. But if we had diabetes, it could give us the menus. It gives you the shopping list. It gives you the menus for each of the days. It tells you, and you give it a price
Insane.
point. It doesn't matter. You can give as many the more detail you give, the better the answer is going to become. We say, how do we help people to eat better? This is the way you help them to eat better. I'm a big runner. I'm a big skier. How do you begin running? I can tell you how to do it, but ChatGPT can give you a much better answer sitting in play. You go down all the things that we talk about. We haven't had the tool. I mean, everyone says, well, the patient doesn't want to cooperate. No, we haven't given the patient the tools to make this happen. This is the evolution. And I think it happens naturally as soon as you move from pay for volume to pay for superior outcomes, higher quality, easier access, lower cost.
I 100% agree. We are actually going to move towards a capitated system, which actually does go from outcomes. We've already seen DRGs being implemented in the hospital system. I think that is going to come through at the bottom, where each endocrinologist will be given per patient, hey, here's your thing, go ahead, and then go from there. One last question before we run out of time today. I've been seeing, I initially started an investor. I'm a founder of Save Life AI, and we're moving forward. But I still get a lot of pitch decks and everything. But a lot of pharmaceutical innovation is now happening because of generative AI, especially in biologic space. And I want to talk to you guys about the importance of digital twins, especially in biologics and maybe oncology, which is immunologics essentially. And then how do you see that in terms of both, like the base level, right? Let's just go to that at the bottom, like how we're going to build new devices because of AI. Because let's just be honest, Google is building AI chips with AI, so it's we are living already in a freaking amazing future. So go ahead. What are your thoughts on improving how AI will have an impact on that process?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Big picture, as you know, you mentioned the pharmaceutical space. There's several companies saying that they can now decrease the cost of a drug from 2 billion to 100 to 200 billion. So that's a 5-10% cost now. And if that's the case, then that brings us that much closer to personalized care, leveraging AI. I literally just posted today about digital twins and my personal journey, and I basically created a RAG model, a digital twin, and I've been using it for everything. And as a result, I've been able to lose weight. My numbers are looking great, everything, and I'm pushing my biological clock back, but I'm leveraging AI and using my physician degree, putting it together to do this. And the cost is nothing because of this technology. And I wouldn't be able to do this, 5-10 years ago, but I can today. So my point is this technology is getting cheaper. Us, the humans, our creativity, we're putting it together, and how can we take it to the next level? And that's how every single person here on this call is showing the future.
Harvey.com is now available, and it's going to be on match.ai, not match.com, if anyone's because anyone who uses AI, Harvey's going to date. Otherwise, no one. That's actually one of the things that I wanted to put. There's really this dichotomy coming, by the way. And anyways, Rob, go ahead. Robbie, go ahead.
Well, I'm not as optimistic that the generative AI tools, as opposed to the narrow AI tools, are going to be that helpful in terms of the creation of new drugs. But where they will have, I think, major impact is going to be between the creation of the drug and getting the final FDA approval, for all the reasons that Harvey just talked about. Because it is going to be able to demonstrate efficacy. It's going to be able to run a lot of clinical trials at a very, very low cost. And that, as Harvey talks about, is often a limiting step for companies. But I want to piggyback a little bit on what Harvey was just talking about. He was talking about keeping himself healthy and the longevity sitting in place. After I was appointed the CEO in Kaiser Permanente, I was invited to give a talk at the university, at the Oregon Health Science building. And at the end of my talk, I had 30 minutes till the car was going to take me to the airport. I walked around and I saw this sign that to me still sticks in my mind. I think about it all the time. It was, the typical student-made, handmade sign. I'm, sitting on the wall. I'm not sure who created it. Across the top in big letters, it said quality, access, cost. And at the bottom in small letters, it said, pick any two. That was the best that we could do until now. Because our mindset was always going to be, if you provide better access, it costs more. If you want to have higher quality, it's going to cost more. If you want a lower cost, you got to limit access. I mean, this is the model that sits right now. You look at prior authorization. What's it designed to do? Lower cost by diminishing utilization. It's always going to be this trade-off. And now I want to say that the future of medicine is the realization that by increasing quality, by increasing access, you lower cost. It's a complete flipping of the world on top. But to accomplish it, you accomplish it by using the generative AI tools to be able to do the things that Harvey said, to be able to keep people healthier, to prevent disease, to better control chronic disease. Because it's not that doctors didn't know what to do. They just don't have the time to do it. And that is what this tool is going to do. It's going to expand in the non-healthcare world. It's going to make things bigger. It's not going to take away from people. It's going to expand people. In the healthcare world, it's the same thing. It's going to elevate health. Imagine 30 to 50% fewer heart attacks, strokes, kidney failures, and cancers. You want to talk about a solution to burnout? There it is. But you can't do it without the capitated model because clinicians aren't going to do it if their income is going to be cut. We have to stop thinking about how do we generate 5 or 10% more revenue or profit out of the revenue and understand that if we're going to eliminate a problem in the first place, we generate a massive amount of money. You can take the 1.5, it's estimated as high as $1.8 trillion and now distribute it. A third to the patient, a third to the insurers, and a third to the clinicians. But let me add one last piece. When I talk about capitation, it's at the delivery system level. We're talking about to clinicians and to hospitals. Because if you don't get it at that level, you don't change the doctor-patient interaction. You don't shift from asking, how do I do more things that are more complex that I can build more? You have EHRs not designed around billing, but around clinical care. You don't do your mindset just goes in the wrong direction. But as soon as it's at that level, clinicians, physicians are some of the smartest people in the world. Hospital administrators are all extremely good at the things that they do relative to the economics of the situation. You bring them together in a way, you now have the opportunity to transform it. Harvey's absolutely right. It's not going to get led by the traditional academic leaders of the past. It's going to be led by the innovators of the future, and they today are available. We just have to give them the opportunity to create a system that's going to create higher quality, better access, lower cost, reduce burnout, improvements in the health of our nation, and the longevity that has now been stagnant. 15 years we've not expanded longevity. We now have the opportunity. And by the way, it's not just for the wealthy. It's going to be for all communities in rural areas and in inner cities, because this technology essentially is very low cost. It's like electricity. It's not like some other type of extremely expensive thing that's only going to be accessed to a few people. This is the future of medicine. I hope it's here in 10 years. It may not be here that fast, and you guys are absolutely right. Other nations may lead the way, and we're going to follow, but it's not going to be stopped, and it's not going to be a bubble.
Robbie, which is very different, right? I'm originally from India, Pakistan, right? I mean, Gujarat area, and we looked up. I mean, FDA is, you have no idea what pull they have internationally if you have an FDA stamp. It's just really hard to see that I can install something in different countries, move faster, and not here. Number 2 point, this is the first time I was talking to another, I cannot name, but CDIO, Chief Digital Innovation Officer. And this is the first time ever that they gave me a problem statement that a patient came to us and asked for it, which is very different than every problem before that was, oh, this clinician came, this problem, Junaid, this is the problem from nursing, this is the problem from, like that, which was odd, right? Nobody is solving the patient problem. This is the first time like the patient is asking for radiology reports to be summarized in this way. So it was insane to hear that from a mouth of a direct this. So that's number 2. I'm going to summarize one of the things that you just said. I think you're absolutely right. We're going to move from from episodic care to real time continuous care. I agree that we're going to see more and more healthcare with capitated models potentially coming in, and then moving towards healthcare in general. We see that activity-based care is going to go away, and we're going to finally realize what we call outcome-based care, where health is the outcome. And I'm going to repeat the a key line of this podcast. AI is like a printing press. I just want a last thought on something. It is still expensive, Robbie. I'm developing it. I'm kind of doing it, and that's why I don't see that this is a bubble. We need a lot more data centers, and we need to build nuclear plants to supply them electricity. I'm going to let Harvey do the last comment on those 2 lines that I said, that we need
Can I
data
make one
centers.
quick
Yeah.
Sure.
Can I make one quick comment in between? Because I think that it's really important that we understand where this technology is going to be tested by the FDA, because that is going to be a limiting factor in this country. This technology can be tested by comparing it to humans. You take an operative robot directed by generative AI and one directed by surgeons, and you have people who don't know whether the tapes off of this procedures were done by the human or the technology. They grade it. And when the grading for the AI is as good or better than the best of the physicians, that's when you provide approval. You can't do it the way we approve past AI, where you want to see the data set, you want to be able to see the outcome. The outcomes vary depending upon the individual sitting there. You compare it against clinicians in terms of making accurate diagnoses, nurses providing advice, all the pieces that are there. You do a head-to-head comparison in the FDA, and when the outcome is better, which it will be, that is when the FDA gives approval. So I think we're going to need a congressional regulatory change, or at least a regulatory change by someone approved by Congress, before these tools are currently used or will be used in the United States. So far, the legal concern is why every major company is creating devices around wellness, not around healthcare. It's why the design is to find people with atrial fibrillation, not to take care of people with atrial fibrillation. What a great tool it would be to take someone with atrial fibrillation and monitor them off of their watch. And yet you can't find that right now coming out of a major company, because they're so afraid of the legal concerns. They'd rather sell the watches in a way that's not going to have that impact. But the biggest opportunities we are ignoring. And that is where I think a major change has to happen. And the FDA is going to have to recognize that you can't start by asking, is this technology perfect? It's not going to be perfect. But you got to ask yourself, is it better? I just saw a great set of data on you probably saw it too, on autonomous cars, where in San Francisco, they looked at the Waymos against the drivers. And the Waymo was 90% less likely to be in an accident. Will people get killed? Absolutely. 40,000 people die every year in the United States today. If we could take that down to 4,000, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Right now, the headlines would scream, it's terrible, 4,000 people died, and they ignore 40,000 people. There are 400,000 misdiagnoses. How do we get that down to 40,000 misdiagnoses, people dying every year? Not diagnoses, but people dying. This, I think, is what we have to understand. And at the end of the day, if I have one big concern, it's going to be the regulatory and legal restrictions in the United States, and as you pointed out, ones that don't exist in quite a number of other countries.
Again, we are going through an FDA inspection. I will actually in the next podcast I'll update you guys and some of the things we learned. Also, this is we will be building. I mean, we Save Life is a very ethical company. We want to make sure that make sure. So Harvey, I'm gonna wave my magic wand. I'm gonna make you right now the governor of Texas. And then, how many nuclear plants and data centers are you gonna do? Off note, you already know about the Star Alliance and everything. So go ahead.
Yeah, they already have those. So on top of that, I wouldn't be putting any on the land. I would use Phantom Space
Ah.
to put them in space because we have solar energy, we have the network, we can decrease the lag time between us and the patient. And so think of it this way, real quick example. Where you live should not determine whether you live. If we have a predictive analytics in the sky to be our first line advisor, then how quickly can we act? How quickly, if I live an hour away from the closest hospital and my AI is telling me, dude, I'm noticing your heart rate's going up, I think you're going into AFib, and I predict that you will have a heart attack in the next 6 hours, you need to go to the hospital now. That is my goal in the future, and that is what I'm going to create.
Beautifully. Well said. Thank you guys again. Thank you, Robbie. Thanks, Harvey, as
Thanks,
usual.
Robbie.
Stay behind for a minute, let it upload. Thank you again for everyone who joined us live. I really appreciate it. Grateful. See you next week, Wednesday, 8 a.m. Central Standard Time. Me and Harvey are in Dallas, so we use that. I thank you, Robert, for coming up online such early from San Diego. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Reese, can you stop the